Okay. Robert, we're live. Hi, guys. So you notice that there's some filters?
I'm feeling very festive today.
Yeah, what the heck is this? Oh, let's try this. Whoa. Yeah, that's not going to work. How about we use this? No? What about this?
Not sure what's going on with that one.
Yeah, not quite sure either. What about this? Hey, Merry Christmas, everybody. We're just trying out the stupid filter that's going on.
Just open your mouth.
What's
open.
this? What about this? Coco. Hey, what's up? Hey,
I got the female indicator there. I'm not sure what that means.
No. What about this? Oh, let's try this maybe. No, look at that.
There
Man,
you go.
that looked like me during
look
high school.
Very, very sad.
Right.
Were you goth in high school?
I was kind of moody in high school.
Moody.
What about? I really like this. Why don't we just do a live?
Apparently, it only wants to make me into a turkey. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of meaning to this turkey thing. All right, here we go. All right, you guys. Sorry for the distraction.
Don't separate from us.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, you guys. We just wanted to check out this feature on Facebook. It's kind of cool that when you do Facebook live streaming like this, Facebook allows you to have these cool features.
A little fun, yeah.
So two dorky psychotherapists just trying out this Facebook live stream. But anyway, my name's Ernesto, licensed marriage and family therapist, and I've got...
Hi guys, Robert Pate, licensed psychologist.
And we are going to talk about something somewhat controversial, and I don't see that talked about much.
Yeah, in fact, we had planned to talk about this just earlier today, and so I was doing a little lit review, seeing what I could find. And we're going to be talking a little bit about separated couples and, how do we do therapy with them? Is it the same? Is it different? In terms of doing couples therapy. And I really couldn't find much of anything. So if anybody has any interesting articles related to doing therapy with separated or divorced couples, love to hear them. Maybe link them in the comments if you find anything. Yeah. But I wasn't able to come across anything in a reasonably quick search. Yeah. So.
And for those of you who are joining in, we're going to talk a little bit more about this. I want you guys to join in and chime in questions. Maybe we'd want to hear what your opinions about this. But let's just point the ground rules for this. There's times when couples separate. It could be maybe they have a discovery of infidelity, right? And then they separate because the emotions are way too high. Or there was some sort of something that made them separate for some time. Anything. It could be what?
A lot of times, they've been basically emotionally separated for a long time and just finally made it official by somebody moving out. And
physically.
And physically moving out. Yeah, and so that's one of the things that comes to mind for me is we're going to kind of think about what does it mean to work with a separated couple versus a couple that's living together, because there are plenty of couples out there, and we've worked with them, of course, mm-hmm. right, who have been together for 10, 20, 30 years and might as well have been separated. Yeah. So how do we think about them?
Yeah, and we're also going to separate physical separation versus emotional separation, because you can live in one space and time but still be emotionally separated. And like I told you earlier, I've had a couple that came in a long time ago where they were separated for 4 years, in fact divorced, and unfortunately he divorced the second wife and then went back to the previous wife. I know that these are not unique cases. These cases happen a lot. So we want to discuss that a little bit more, and we want to go into detail on how you may want to deal with it. And for those of you who are not therapists, and for those of you who are going to watch us on YouTube, we are going to definitely discuss how to reach out to a clinician. Now, Paul says that you've heard that most couples separate over money, sex, and in-laws. Ooh.
Right. And actually, that brings to mind for me, a couple of weeks ago, we did one of these talking about spiritual issues in couples therapy. And so, Paul, you just reminded me, people think about money being the root of all evil, and in terms of kind of a scriptural reference, some people make that. I think it's in Proverbs maybe, but talking about the love of money being the root of all evil. And so if people are saying, yeah, we got separated over money or sex or the in-laws, it was probably the love of that thing over the partner, putting something else before their partner rather than the thing itself, right? So, your in-laws are ridiculous, and, you don't want to deal with them. They're obnoxious. But they're not the ones that get in the way of your relationship. It's not coming together as a couple to deal with that in-law situation, right?
Yeah. So for those of you who are couples therapists, please chime in on this live streaming video. There's a lot of things that we want to discuss and talk about, because this is a very controversial approach to counseling. Because one, we have to make sure as clinicians that we identify the need. So first things first. So let's say I get a phone call, or Dr. Pate, you get a phone call from a client that says, I've been separated from my wife for this amount of time, but we have decided to come back together and work things out. And those things happen a lot. And what are some of the things that you would do in the very initial stages of, or at least in the conversation?
Right. So this is going to be something I'm interested in, whether it's an individual or a couple or a family for that matter. I want to know, are they really invested in the process? Because if they're not, if only one person really is invested and the other is just going to be kind of a bump on a log there, we might just spin our wheels for months and never get anywhere. So I'm first of all just going to want to know, are you guys really invested in making this work? And that's an emotional investment, probably more than anything, but also they need to know it's going to be a financial investment. And if they've gone as far as separating or divorcing and they're trying to make it work again, it may be even a longer process.
So you're saying that when somebody calls, you schedule that appointment for them to be physically in your office, and then you do a huge evaluation on whether they are in or out of the process.
Yeah, and so, that'll be something that we'd ask directly, but, it's just going to be something that kind of naturally occurs in the course of the couple's assessment anyway, where we get a bit of their relationship history, the presenting problem, and the context of their relationship history. I don't tend to get much into individual histories very too much in that first couple of sessions. We'll do that in the next couple of sessions, get their individual histories. But yeah, I want to know, are you guys really invested in making this process work, or kind of putting in the time and the work to make it work?
Yeah. So you wrote a blog some time ago called The Hokey Pokey.
Yeah.
So I want you to explain to the audience what this blog was about and what is Hokey Pokey.
Yeah, so I still have to trademark that, a hokey pokey marriage. But if you're interested in reading the blog, drpatesays.com. But it's called Hokey Pokey Marriage, and the way I think about marriages is that there are a few different types. We've got people who are in committed relationships. We've got people who have just decided, I'm not in this relationship anymore. And then we've got a lot of people who are in what I would think about as hokey pokey marriages. If you're not familiar with the hokey pokey and you've never been to a Caucasian wedding before, the idea is you put your left foot in, you put your left foot out, you put your left foot in, and you shake it all about, right? That's kind of the gist of it. So when I think about hokey pokey marriages, what I think about is somebody who is technically married, somebody who's technically in a committed relationship, and yeah, people are doing the hokey pokey, that's good. So you're in a committed relationship, but you're not all the way in there, right? You've got one foot in, right? You've got one foot in, but you've got one foot out.
Hokey pokey.
So it maybe some
Caucasian
signs.
Parties.
So some signs that somebody might be in a hokey pokey relationship would be that they're already kind of thinking past the relationship. They're thinking, what would my life be like outside of this marriage? What would it be like to have my own place?
Yeah.
They might start looking for apartments or setting aside money,
Yeah.
start opening up a separate bank account when they used to have a shared account. So these might be some signs to look for.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that you want to assess for a level of commitment within the relationship, and you talk about the hokey pokey, which is either they're in or they're out. So how long do you spend making sure that I'm assuming you're saying that they need to be fully committed in the process in order for this counseling sessions to work?
I wouldn't say they have to be fully committed. I just want to know, where are we starting? Because if they're not both fully committed, that's where we need to start. We need to figure out, can we get both people on board? So kind of re-engaging a withdrawn partner might be EFT language we could throw at this. But I want to know, if we don't have both people on board, what is it going to take to get them on board? We need to work on that emotional engagement first. Because if they're not emotionally engaged, nothing's going to hit home. It's not going to stick. It's not going to make a difference day to day or week to week.
So the factor that we have to look at is a level of commitment. If it's a low level commitment, obviously, there is a high risk for them to separate. So if it's a low risk commitment, which is a high commitment in the relationship, then there's a huge possibility for them to this whole process to work. And I think
that's the hope. Yeah,
that's the hope. But this is really important to understand because a lot of clinicians start with, okay, let's work on your communication. Let's do this. Let's do that. They go into the deep work, but not necessarily going into the commitment level. Correct?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is all just part of that assessment process, and it's going to help us know what are our goals, and we might have multiple stages of goals. If they're separated, one eventual goal might be to be living in the same place together again.
Right.
But that doesn't need to happen right away, and frankly, I never push for that. When I work with a couple that's separated, I'm not interested so much in are they living together as much as I'm interested in is your relationship going well.
That's interesting that you point this out because yesterday I read an article that a couples counseling or a session does not work. Counseling session does not work if the goals are not fully defined and in conjunction with the commitment level of the therapist and also with the client. Very interesting article.
So, I mean, so many articles and textbooks will tell you that we need to collaboratively make these goals because I might say, yeah, let's get you guys back living in the same place and, let's get this thing rolling, right? But maybe that's actually not good for them. Maybe there needs to be more emotional safety before they can live in the same room.
Going back to basics of couples counseling. Okay, so let's say just for the purpose of this conversation, you get your clients to the point of, okay, we are going to be committed, as evidenced by us being in front of you and doing all these things. So do you have a time frame for a couple session or at least a commitment time frame? What's your thoughts on this?
I hate the cop-out answers like case by case, right? But that's really what it has to be because if I'm putting my artificial timeline on the therapy process itself or on them moving back in together or on them feeling safe with each other, it might happen in one session. It might happen in 12 sessions. I don't know. It might 20. Who knows, right? And that may depend on what are their current circumstances. Is there a continuing situation they have to deal with? Is there substance use? And that's why, say a wife and kids moves out and they're separated in that physical sense because the husband is using drugs and is not safe to be around, right? That may be different from I'm just having a hard time trusting you, so I don't want to be around you, rather than it's not safe.
Yeah. So when you get your clients in, the couple in, at the end of the session, do you then do a soft call to action to schedule the next appointment, or do you leave it up to them based on the conversation you have in the What do you do at that point?
So typically, and this would be for any couple whether they're separated or not, I would let them know before we even get started. This is typically how I would do things. I would meet with you together, get a sense for what's the presenting problem, what's the level of commitment, as we talked about already, and then the next couple of sessions or weeks, whatever it ends up being, would be individual appointments, and then we'd meet back together again, talk about what I've noticed, what have they experienced over the last couple of weeks, and then decide together, do we want to move forward? Does it make sense to move forward? Like, is this going to be successful?
Mm-hmm. One of the most interesting things about, in the beginning of grad school, a lot of clinicians or professors would tell you, your next goal would be try to get them in the session the next time around. Mm-hmm. Right, to inspire them to continue and to commit to the relationship and to the process. You would say what to that?
I would say that is typically my personal selfish goal. The goal of session 1 is to get them to come to session number 2. But the more ethical goal there would be to get them to come to session number 2 if it looks like it's a good fit and if I feel like I can help them.
Got it.
And if really nobody's on board, what's the point? They're going to come in for a couple of weeks and it's not going to work out. They're going to be frustrated and disappointed not only with me and themselves, but with therapy in general, and they may not come back to see anyone, whether it's me or not.
Got it. Really interesting point that you're making here. Now, some clinicians kind of stay away from separating the couple and doing individual counseling. Now, self-disclosure, I do the couples work, and as needed, I separate the couple to do individual sessions just to evaluate. Now, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I could see the argument for having them together the whole time. The way I kind of think about it is I've got 2 kids, and when my wife has had kids, I've gone to the ultrasound appointments. And so there's always the moment where she goes in and gets her initial nurse visit. They take her blood pressure, whatever they do. But then there's also, I've been told, the point where they show her a piece of paper that says, are you safe in your home? Are you being abused? Something like that. And so she doesn't even have to verbally say anything. She could just point to yes or no.
Yes.
So that's the way I think about the individual evaluations, is that if there is perchance some kind of abuse going on, especially a safety issue for either partner, I don't want to miss that. I want to give them a chance to say that, not with their partner around, and have a little more safety there. Because if there is, I don't want to go forward with couples counseling, at least not right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a leeway, there's a flexibility to doing couples therapy together, and then couples therapy individually, and then having them come back together. So this is the approach that it is going to be definitely up to you whether you'd want to take that approach, but there is no law against doing that. It's also about prepping your clinician or your clients to make sure that, hey, I want to separate the both of you, and or what's your thoughts about doing individual counseling? So Paul, you said, how do you handle the confidentiality when you see them individually? This is a great question that's a circle going on with a lot of the clinicians.
Yeah. So the way that a lot of couples, counselors, maybe most even, would have some kind of no secrets policy. And the way that I frame that for my couples is that I tell them I see their relationship as my client, and when we think about the legalities around this, around confidentiality, if one of them lawyers up and wants notes, the other person needs to sign off unless I get some kind of court order. So the way I think about what happens in these individual sessions is I'm not keeping secrets. I'm not there to be your confidant. I'm there to assess how's the relationship going. Now, if you say something that's of concern, like my partner's abusing me, it's not necessarily my job to call up their partner and say, hey, they said this about you. Is this true? I'm going to, we might bring that up when we meet the next time. If they say I'm having an affair, can you keep that a secret? The answer is no, but I want to help you get to a point where you can share that with your partner.
Yeah. And this is very important to understand that the whole secrets policy is to the degree where there are some areas where you disclose and some areas that ethically and legally you keep, right? You want to explore some of those things. The other thing that you want to look at as well, I love what you said, and it's a reminder for all of us that your actual client is a relationship, right? And you want to frame it that way. And when you look at the client, the actual client, and making the problem instead of the clients being the problem, making the problem, like a solution-focused approach. This would help you to understand how to work with the clients, right? To kind of unpathologize your clients as much as possible.
Yeah. And so, I mean, when we have, say, one partner who's had an affair or something like that, that's obviously a problem. But a lot of times when that has happened, it's not just that this person's an evil person and they went out and did this thing just to hurt and spite their partner. A lot of times there's a lot of relational pathology underlying that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah. So, all right, we talked about, for those of you who are just joining in, please chime in the conversation. What's your thoughts, your opinions? If you got to tell us we're full of crap, we are going to open that up to discussion. But we talked about, in the very beginning, getting your clients in physically to see you. The other thing is what we do is we assess for the level of commitment within the process. No hokey pokey dancing. We try to eliminate that as much as possible. The next thing is to identify time frames and putting down some of the foundation in the process, which is making sure that they're either committed, the process, what they can expect, if you as a clinician have to pull them aside for individual counseling, talk about the legal and ethics and all of those things. So now let's just say, for the purpose of this conversation, that they're already committed, right? They want to stay in the process. Now, this is where you mentioned a little bit about the EFT work or whatever modality that you use, right? What's your next piece on exploring with these couples?
All right, so once we get them in, whether they're separated, divorced, living together, married, whatever the situation is, once we establish that they're both kind of in it to win it is the way I think about it, then I just proceed with therapy as usual. Again, I'm not concerned about their timetable for when they move back in together or not. I just want the relationship to be healthy, because if they move in too quickly, they're just going to run into the same problems. It's going to exacerbate the problems.
Got it.
And then it's not going to work.
So this is kind of different from what I've heard in the past, which is, I really agree with you that sometimes we are too quick in getting the couples together. But you're saying trust their ability or when they want to move in together, instead of saying you need to get back together, you need to get back together, you need to get back together now. What do you say to that, to people who say, no, get them together as soon as possible because you're going to work in that manner?
Yeah, I just want it to be an ongoing conversation. So like any issue in a relationship, I just want it to be on the table. And if they can't talk about that, they definitely shouldn't be living together if they can't even talk about it. But if they can talk about it, then let's talk about it. If they can't talk about it, we need to talk about why they can't talk about it. Right?
And it kind of gives you a glimpse of if they can't live together and it's been a while, you can kind of assess for their level of commitment on there. Or let's not judge here, but maybe the level of pain or trauma that exists within the relationship.
Yeah, what's the relative level of safety or trust? So, when it comes to, you guys got to move in together, sure, I mean, that might be nice if the relationship's going all right.
Got it.
So if I'm interested in them moving in together, great, but that doesn't do anything if they're not ready. So I just want them to be able to talk about it. I'll bring it up regularly if they don't. If it's been a few weeks and we haven't talked about that, let's just talk about why it's not a thing for them. So we're checking out a question.
Yeah, so Alexandra, hi, I guess, from Texas. Right.
Hello, Alexandria.
Yeah, Alexandria, sorry about that. So brilliant discussion. Here's her question. So the relationship is a client. The clients are not pathologized, but they're two separate individuals who have individual baggage. How do you address individual baggage? First of all, I would define individual baggage, right? I would define how these individual baggage are playing a dance between each other, because it's dancing. All our baggage, all our baggage together, or our baggage separately is doing its own dance, right? It's doing the hokey pokey, right? But when you add that dance with another individual who has their own baggage, their baggage and your baggage are dancing.
It's an ugly dance sometimes.
It's an ugly dance. And so you have to assess how it dances alone as opposed to how it dances with the other person's baggage. Let's just be real. We are all carrying baggage. So I would say...
Hey, speak for yourself.
My bad. Yeah, Robert, you're perfect.
Yeah, I got it down, man. That's why I'm a therapist, because I'm perfect.
Exactly. So you want to separate and identify those baggage and then deal with it from that perspective. Now, here's the other caveat to this. This is really important to understand. Is that baggage trauma? Yeah. That is one thing that you have to address first. Relational trauma or relational injury is one thing that is going to dominate that dance. So for those of you who are trauma-focused therapists or trauma-informed therapists, this is your work right here. And I do believe all therapists, no matter if you work with couples or individual, must be trauma-informed or trauma-trained therapists. That's just me.
Yep.
What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, if we're ignorant to trauma, then we may miss a lot of what's going on, the whys of what's going on. So, great point, yeah. And I see Mario's question there. We'll get to that in a second. So in terms of, what do we do with that trauma in session? How do we engage them? I think this partly came up in terms of that timetable discussion. Individual baggage, that's what it was. How do we deal with individual baggage? So sometimes we refer out for individual work. A lot of times when I work with couples, they're also seeing one or both people may be seeing an individual therapist as well. And that can be really helpful because then you don't end up doing individual therapy in your couple session.
Conjunctive therapy.
Yeah, so it's really common for couple sessions to start skewing very much toward one partner if we as a therapist are not intentionally focused on bringing up how does that impact your partner? How does your partner's trauma impact you? Because that's what we're there to address. We're not there to fix their individual
And during
stuff.
that point, you want to make sure not to pathologize or blame the other person based on their baggage or trauma, right? We want to make sure that trauma is trauma, baggage is baggage. We have to make sure that it separates from the clients, from the human being, onto the symptom and the pathology, correct?
Yeah. So, you may end up working with a couple where you need to stop the couple's work for a while so that somebody who is really heavily impacted by their trauma can go work on it on their own because they're getting so triggered in the couple's work. So, don't be afraid to stop and then start back up if you need to, if it's going to make the couple's work more effective.
Again, if you have this idea that the relationship is your client, you will be a little bit more flexible and creative in your approach in working with the with the client. Now, Mario, we want to address your question. Your question is, what if?
So we're talking about angry clients, right? Do we let them argue in session? Personally, at least early on, I like to let people argue. Just like, the idea of resistance, I don't mind resistance. I embrace it. I like it because I think that means our clients are showing us their true selves. If they're being resistant, they're not just, kind of blowing smoke up your skirt or whatever the phrase is, right? So they're being real. Yeah. If they don't want to be there, they're letting you know one way or another.
Yeah, and this is a very good point. One, you have to make sure that there's a level of safety within the room, but at the same time, you want to make sure not to judge or even shame the individual for experiencing a whole range of emotion in your session, right?
Yeah.
The main thing that we want to look at, and I teach this to all my students, is that as a clinician, you are an emotional container for your clients. And if you cannot, as a clinician, contain your clients, if you have your own baggage or your own trauma based on someone who have aggressive tendencies in the session, couples counseling may not be for you. So there needs to be a lot of individual work for the clinician as well. So clinicians here are not off the hook when you're working with couples.
Got to manage your own triggers, and especially if you're not comfortable with anger.
Yep.
So yeah, great point, April. So letting them argue, but it really gives us information about how they deal with each other. And of course, there's always that adage of, if they're this way with me in a professional setting, sure, it's a medical type setting, but if they're that way here, what is it like in the four walls of their home? Insight.
So when someone is angry in your session, that energy in that room is information for you as a clinician to know what to do at that point, to at least get an idea of, holy crap, this energy in the room here, I can't even imagine this type of energy going at home. So that would give you a sense of creativity in how to work with your clients from then on.
Yeah. And really, I like to be a facilitator of grace wherever I can, and I certainly fall short myself sometimes, but when a client gets really enraged toward their partner in session, a lot of times it's for a good reason, and a lot of times they've been holding back for a long time, and so they may save it up.
You have your limits.
Yeah, and they may be saving it up, and at their breaking point for the whole week before they come in, and they just save everything for a weekly dump on you, the therapist. And if that's the case, initially we say, okay, this is the only safe place for you to talk. But after a few weeks, we need to have figured out a way for them to not be just dumping in session.
Yeah.
So that's where we got to work on those communication
skills.
skills.
Once you give the signal for your clients, for your couple, that it's emotionally safe for them to experience all range of emotion within your session, then now you might have to put some boundaries onto what the process looks like, because there is a level of self-control when you are in session. So that's when you kind of categorize or put boundaries on your clients at that point.
Yeah, and so if they're just venting, the venting itself is not that helpful. It doesn't solve anything. That's why, in terms of psychoanalysis, the catharsis isn't the healing factor. It feels good, so we feel like we got a little healing, but it doesn't solve any problems. So it's certainly not going to solve their couple's issues. So it might feel nice. It gives us some information, but after 1 or 2 times of getting rage going in the session, really have to kind of nip that in the bud and just comment on the process, get them to the point of being able to talk about why did they get to that. What was going on for them that they got enraged at that moment.
And so we also, here's the other thing too. I cannot stress enough the work of the clinician at this point. There's a lot of work to be done when you're doing couples counseling. You have to identify how you are reacting physically, emotionally, and even spiritually with your couples who come in. An all-around clinician who's engaged with the clients in the session can really be effective, okay? Because, again, a lot of our stuff is hidden in the unconscious. Yalom talks a lot about this. He's phenomenal at this stuff. So you want to make sure that you look at that as well. Now, we want to move on. We got a time frame here, and I think Robert is getting hungry.
I'm always hungry, though. I'm always hungry.
Right, we're going to close it off just in a little bit, but this is a really good discussion. Robert, what do you have next?
One of the things that, in terms of the whole being separated, often what has, one of the things that couples are bothered by is that they're paying 2 rents, or a mortgage and a rent. They've got an apartment and a home. So there may be some pressure to move up the time frame for moving in. So just, try not to fall victim to that. Again, if they're thinking about money as the reason to come to therapy or not come to therapy, that's not going to be a great motivator over time for them. Again, commitment to the relationship and making that work has got to be the primary motivator. Certainly, if they're worried about the costs of couples counseling, this can be a really interesting discussion point for them. I've blogged about this as well. The costs of couples counseling is typically much cheaper than going through a contested divorce. It's also a lot cheaper than having 2 rents. So if they're worried about the cost of couples counseling and they're a separated couple, this is one of those places where you kind of have an ace in the hole and you can say, how much are you paying in rent?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a lot less than what I charge for therapy.
Yeah, you want to have your couples kind of identify that, and that's a really good point. Now, I want to go into, Alexandria, your question about triangulation. What have you found to be the successful tools to avoid triangulation? Okay, so I was first trained with Bowenian therapy, and Bowenian is my man. I mean, he's Bowen. Bowen? Bowen. I know this guy. It's been a long time. But anyway, triangulation actually works and has its purpose in the couples counseling. And you want to first identify what the role is triangulation. And a lot of people say, let's eliminate triangulation. But if you eliminate triangulation, you can actually cause a lot of stress for your client. So identify, first of all, what the purpose of triangulation is within the couple session, right? That's where you want to work towards. And then the healthy part of this, the easier answer, is to work them towards differentiation. What is about them that that they can't do without by themselves, right? So the triangulation tool is basically understanding that if that triangulation works in the relationship, don't eliminate it. There's good triangulation, there's bad triangulation. Let me just give an example about good triangulation, which I can't think of one right now. What could be a good triangulation?
Well, I'm just thinking so for instance, my wife just had a girls' night with some friends last night, and they all got together and talked about their husbands, right? And I encouraged that. I said, great, did you get to complain about me, right? So it's and she's open with me when something's bothering her, but it's just nice to have someone else that can kind of bounce ideas off of. So in some ways you might think about that as triangulation.
Thank you for saving me. That's my point. Exactly. That's it. So basically, hopefully we answered your question about triangulation. So there's so much complexity to working with separated couples who decide for whatever reason they want to come back, right? As a clinician, it's ethical for us to really identify, is this really going to work? Are you on emotion? What's going on? Why do you guys want to get back? All of these discussions and tools are for you to kind of evaluate. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just something that I tell all my couples is that I can't save your marriage. Right? I can put you in a good position. I can offer you tools. I can facilitate a process. I can help you see things that you didn't see before. But ultimately, you have to save your own marriage. I can't do that for you. So I try to praise the heck out of my clients when they're doing well,
Exactly.
and remind them when they say, "Oh my gosh, is there a Dr. Pate app? Can I carry you around in my pocket?" No.
That's kind of cool. Dr. Pate
Internalize
app.
the therapy. I know, right? Wouldn't that be fun? But I hope you've internalized the process so that you don't need me anymore, so that you don't need therapy. We're in one of those weird professions where we're always trying to work ourselves out of a job. And it's so much fun when we finally get to do that. And, if they're really grateful, just say, you know what, just send somebody else my way. Let's save somebody else's marriage. You're good to go now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This is good stuff. We want to continue the conversation. If you guys have articles that talks about couples who separate and want to come back and some intervention, this would be amazing to kind of look at. The other thing that I want to do a plug, Dr. Pate is going to be doing a workshop. He doesn't know this yet fully, but he's going to.
I've heard this.
Yes, and it's going to be recorded, but it's going to be here in Southern California. And we're going to be doing a lot of the experiential work with working with couples and how to keep them in session and or evaluate whether couples counseling is good for them and all of those fun things. So look out for, and it's going to be continuing for you and for those of you who are licensed and pre-licensed or in school still with your training. We are a continuing education provider under California, and we can sign up on your hours when you attend. But anyway, just wanted to put a plug on this guy. He's pretty awesome. Yeah, he's pretty fun. Anyway, look back through this video. This is some great stuff. We are Cap Family Therapy. We've got offices in Huntington Beach and also in Fullerton, California. If you wanted to visit our website and get a feel for who we are, we got videos there. And let us know what you think. Thank you so much for joining in.
And let us know if there are other topics you want that we could all discuss together again.
Absolutely.
And thanks for your comments and questions, guys. Good stuff.
You guys
Good
are
talking with you.
amazing people. Thank you so much for the work that you do in your community. Anyway, we are signing off, and we will see you next week. Oh, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. Where's our Christmas filter?
Oh, yeah, where's... Yeah, I don't think you're gonna work.
It's not working for me.
No, I don't like that. I actually like this one.
See,
there.
it doesn't. I used to be a reindeer, and I've been demoted to goth dead person.
Right. You know what? I'm gonna do this last thing right here, and we're gonna
You
sign
gonna
off.
turn me into a princess again?
Yeah, let's do that. This
There
is
you
my
go.
favorite.
High school Ernesto.
Yeah,
Love
this is me in high school. I used to listen to a lot of Cure. So
Oh,
anyway,
man.
everyone. Wait,
Good
let
night,
me just
everybody,
take this off. We don't want to. We don't want to send people
in
off.
normal. Okay.
There you go.
No more nightmares. Good night,
No.
everybody.
All right. Bye, bye, guys. See ya.